This happened to me in my early 20s. I was backpacking through Europe for 6 months. I was in this group of 4 Americans that had decided to go camping while we were in Scotland. There was a lake nearby where we could swim. And so after we had set up camp, that's what we did. It was a beautiful day. We swam in the lake, hung out, sat around the fire, drank some beer, made some s'mores, just enjoyed ourselves. And we went to bed early because the next day we had plans to do more exploring. This is gonna sound kind of stupid, but we really didn't know what we were doing. My friend started screaming at the top of his lungs, and the commotion outside the tent slowly came to a halt. All around the tent were thousands of little pebbles that were not there the evening before. They were arranged in a circle around the tent, with a large area in the center. In the middle of the circle was a single footprint that looked like a human footprint. And right outside the tent opening was another footprint. It looked like somebody had been standing right outside the tent staring in. We stayed in the tent, hugging each other for dear life until the sun came up. Turns out he had gotten up in the middle of the night to pee, and he just wandered off and forgot where he was supposed to meet us. He said he couldn't find us, and then he got distracted by the pub and just sat down and had a couple drinks. We packed up our stuff and ran to the car. As we were driving away, we looked back at the tent, and there in the distance, standing by the tent, was the tallest, scariest looking man, like 7 feet tall with long dreadlocks. But also, like, why would you forget your friends? I asked a simple question. Why would you forget your friends? And you gave me an answer that makes sense, a reasonable explanation. But deep down, I know there's something else going on here. I feel it. I feel it in my bones. Well, I guess you don't have to worry about that, because now you can share your stories with friends wherever you are. Yeah, exactly. Also, please follow and subscribe. And until next time, sleep well. The hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I was like, oh my God, that was him. And I've never told anyone this story until today. I was always too scared. Scared? What are you scared of? Come on, please, please don't show me. Please, please, please. Okay, I won't show you. Don't look. Don't look. Don't look. Scared of what? What did you see? You didn't see anything. Stop typing. You're not gonna find anything. There's nothing to find. That was the guy that was tapping on the tent. I remember shaking and whispering in the tent, like, guys, you gotta wake up. I think there's somebody out there. About 2 hours later, we came back to the campground. Well, fast forward to the next morning. We're at breakfast in Edinburgh. We're telling this story to each other about how freaked out we were. Then one of my friends looks at me and he's like, hey, where's Alex? I was sitting next to him the whole time. I was like, I don't know. He was here a second ago. So we started looking for him. Our stuff was still there, but the tent was gone. I swear to God, if that dude from the tent had anything to do with this, I will kill him. I literally started running around the streets of Edinburgh looking for this guy. I was freaking out. I was calling his name, knocking on doors. I don't know what I was thinking. I was just desperate to find him. And there were no signs of anybody having been there, except for the footprint. Like it was a complete ghost town. We all started hearing noises outside the tent, and nobody could tell what they were. My friend rolled over and said, there's nothing out there. Just go back to sleep. So we tried. None of us had ever camped before, and none of us really knew how to put up a tent. But we did our best, and we got the tent set up. We were about an hour outside of Edinburgh in a place called Aberfoyle. I don't remember who woke up first, but somebody woke up in the middle of the night and started freaking out. About 30 minutes later, it happened again. Somebody started tapping on the tent. My friend yelled, "Get away from the tent." And then we heard something dragging, like somebody was dragging themselves away. So we were like, okay, maybe it was an animal or something. And then we all went back to sleep. Maybe 15 minutes later, it happened again. Something tapping on the tent, followed by heavy footsteps dragging away. My friend started freaking out again. He started yelling and making tons of noise. Then we started hearing screams in the woods. Big guttural screams. One of my other friends started crying, which freaked me out even more. I was like, what the hell is out there? Then we started hearing what sounded like hail for about 5 minutes, followed by heavy footsteps near the tent again. When the sun finally came up, we unzipped the tent to the creepiest scene. Needless to say, we no-peed out of there. We were all shaken up, so we decided to drive around a bit and then come back to the campground later to get our stuff. We were pretty scared at this point, so we just grabbed our stuff and got the hell out of there. We couldn't find him anywhere. We checked the bathroom. We checked outside. We started calling his phone and nobody answered. And after about an hour, we found him sitting in a pub across the street from our hotel. So needless to say, after hearing that, we left that place immediately. We didn't even finish our breakfast. We got in the car and drove straight home. Yeah, I know it's crazy. I mean, who just gets up and walks away in the middle of the night? Now, before you go, I want to make something very clear. This video was posted with permission. Everything I just told you happened to me. Wait, no, there is something. What? No, I don't. I don't want to see that. Let me show you. I asked a question. Tell me, have you ever experienced something unexplainable? If so, I want you to click the link below and submit your story to be featured on this channel. I found this video clip online, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I've always wanted to do some camping and hiking, but after watching this, maybe I should rethink that dream of mine. There were 4 friends who were out on a hike. There was a fire pit with a fire still burning inside of it. The car that they would have assumed the supplies belonged to was nowhere to be found, and there was no trace of anyone being around at all. Maybe someone had gone into the woods to use the bathroom, or maybe they had just wandered off and were going to come back. They decided to set up their own tent nearby and make their own dinner over the fire. When it got dark, the wind picked up and they started to hear noises in the trees. At first, they thought nothing of it. They couldn't make out the words that were being said, but it sounded like they were talking about the 2 tents that had been set up. They knew that there was no one else around, and now they were hearing voices in the forest. They huddled together and tried to ignore the voices, but they continued to get louder. They were close enough to hear the words that were being said. They were talking about how the tents weren't big enough and how they needed more room. They were getting closer and closer. They could hear the voices behind them getting closer and closer. Then suddenly, they saw a light in the distance. They didn't know where it came from, but they hoped that it was a road or a house. They didn't care. They just kept running. They didn't know where they were going, but they didn't want to stay there. They didn't want that man to find them. The friends quickened their pace and tried to walk as silently as possible. Someone had left a light on inside of it, and they were hoping that whoever lived there could help them. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe for more scary stories. Thank you for listening and have a good night. A man stood on the porch and looked around. He didn't say anything. He just stared out into the darkness. The friends were scared. They didn't know what to do. They were hiding behind the tree, and they could see the man standing on the porch. They knocked on the door, and then they ran to hide behind a tree. They didn't know what was out there, and they didn't want to be seen. One of the friends started to think that maybe they should pack up and leave. He wasn't sure if he wanted to spend the night in the forest, especially not after hearing those voices. They continued to talk in hushed voices, and it sounded like they were getting closer. They jumped in and drove away as fast as they could. They never looked back. They never wanted to see that house again. The trees could make a lot of noise when the wind blew through them. But then they started to hear voices. They didn't want to take anything from the other tent because they didn't know who it belonged to. His friend agreed, and they started to pack up their things. They didn't want to make too much noise and draw attention to themselves. They could hear footsteps crunching in the leaves, and they could hear branches snapping. They were being followed. The friends started to run. They didn't know what was out there following them, but they didn't want to find out. They finished packing up as quickly as they could, and then they started to walk away. But they did take some of the wood that had already been chopped up. They looked inside of the tents, and they even checked around the fire to see if anyone was hiding. But there was no one there. There were 2 tents set up side by side, and there was even food on one of the tables. It almost looked like the people who had set up the campsite had just left and were coming back later that night. The friends couldn't believe their luck. They dropped off their packs and headed right over to the fire to warm up. They had been walking for a long time, and they hadn't seen another couple of hikers for a while. All of them were getting tired and wanted to set up camp and get a fire going so they could make dinner. But there was one problem. They didn't have a tent, and they didn't have enough supplies to start a fire. This is when they heard what sounded like screams in the forest. But every once in a while, one of them would glance over at the other tent and wonder who had been there before them. After their meal, they settled down for the night. 2 of them slept inside of the tent that had already been set up, and the other 2 slept in their own tent. Then out of nowhere, they came across a campsite. It was perfectly set up and ready to go. But then they started to notice some strange things. First of all, there were no people anywhere to be seen. They sat by the fire for a little bit longer, trying to figure out what was going on. They made a fire big enough to cook their meal, and they told stories to each other to pass the time. Before going to sleep, they made sure that the fire was completely out and that there was nothing that could cause a wildfire. The voices were low and raspy, and they seemed to be coming from inside the forest. The friends inside of the tents started to get scared. He nudged his friend awake and whispered that they should probably leave. The voices in the forest seemed to get louder as they walked. As they walked, they could hear the voices getting louder and louder. They were getting closer and closer. They ran as fast as they could through the forest. When they got closer, they realized that it was a house. They heard footsteps inside of the house, and then the door opened. He took a step forward, and then another. He was coming towards them. The friends panicked and ran away. They ran and ran until they finally got to their car. That's the story. Welcome back, everyone. This is part 3 of our scariest camping stories. Before we get into this one, I'm going to ask you guys for a favor. All I ask is that you hit that like button if you want more videos like this. We had chosen a secluded spot about a half-mile off the main road and down a winding forest path, but then another light appeared, followed by another and another. Dozens of glowing orbs seemed to be floating silently between the trees. The lights were moving erratically, changing directions and hovering in mid-air, as if suspended by an invisible force. We watched in horror as the tent was torn to shreds, but whatever was out there didn't seem interested in coming inside the tent. The tent was ripped to shreds, and surrounding the tent were thousands of little pebbles that were not there the evening before. Also surrounding the tent in a near-perfect circle were also 20 or so 20 to 40-pound boulders that were also not there the evening before. My girlfriend and I no-peed out of there and have never been back. We were completely lost. The sun began to set and we were starting to panic. We drove home without saying a word to each other. When we told our parents what had happened, they said we had probably just gotten lost in the woods and that nothing bad had actually happened to us. But I don't think that was the case. To this day, I still have nightmares about that cave, and I will never go camping again. We needed to find somewhere to hide for the night, because there was no way we were staying out in the open in those woods after dark. 3 days into the hike, we had only seen one other couple. Big guttural screams. Obviously, we were freaked out sitting in the tent, not knowing what was out there. And the kids would stay by the tent with instructions to not leave the tent under any circumstances. We immediately panicked and started yelling their names. The forest was silent. The case remains unsolved to this day and serves as a haunting reminder of the dangers that can lurk in the wilderness. We started to search the area for any sign of the children, but we couldn't find them anywhere. We called 911 and reported them missing. The police and search and rescue teams spent several days looking for the children, but they were never found. Well, the four of us were gone. We heard screams in the forest. Big guttural screams. Obviously, we were freaked out sitting in the tent, not knowing what was out there. And we started hearing what sounded like hail for about 10 minutes, followed by heavy footsteps near our camp. We started yelling and making tons of noise, and the commotion outside the tent slowly came to a halt. Then we started hearing what sounded like hail for about 10 minutes, followed by heavy footsteps near our camp. My two friends and I started yelling and making tons of noise, and the commotion outside the tent slowly came to a halt. The hike was beautiful and challenging. We had some elevation gain, and we were exhausted. We have some truly terrifying stories in store for you. We decided to pitch our tents and sleep for the night. We found a small cave and decided to hide in there for the night. We curled up in the fetal position and waited for morning. All around the tent were thousands of little pebbles that were not there the evening before. Also, if you want to help us reach our goal of 1 million subscribers, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. With that out of the way, let's get into the final story. Also surrounding the tent in a near-perfect circle were also 20 to 40 pound boulders that were also not there the evening before. We had planned a 3-day hike with another couple and their 2 kids. On the first day, we hiked in and set up camp along with the other couple. Their 2 kids, a boy and a girl, were 10 and 12 at the time. My 2 friends and I no-peed out of there and have never been back. Yeah, rightfully so. Remind me to never go camping ever again. Remind me to just stick to the city. Yeah, rightfully so. Glad you got out of there okay. Remind me to never go camping ever again. Remind me to just stick to the city. My girlfriend and I screamed and made tons of noise, but the creature didn't seem to react. We were pretty inexperienced, so we just went to a local state park. We set up camp and were enjoying the outdoors. The only other people we saw were an older married couple who warned us about an area in the woods that was unsafe and to avoid it at all costs. Of course, being invincible 19-year-olds, we didn't listen. It continued to growl and tear at the tent until finally it gave up and disappeared into the night. We walked past the point we should have turned around hours ago, and suddenly the forest changed. The trees went from normal-sized to absolutely massive, and the ground became very uneven and rocky. We couldn't find our way back to the trail, and we were starting to get scared. We decided to turn around and head back the way we came. My girlfriend and I watched in awe and fear as the lights continued to dance around in the sky. We couldn't explain what we were seeing. After pitching our tent and making a small fire, we started to settle in for the night. As darkness fell, the forest grew quiet. Only the crackling fire and the chirping of crickets broke the silence. We could hear its heavy breathing and feel the vibrations of its footsteps as it paced back and forth. My girlfriend and I stayed perfectly still, hoping that whatever was out there would eventually lose interest in us and move away. But the growling continued for what felt like hours, and we didn't dare make a sound ourselves. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. This one comes from a Reddit user. It was late at night, and my girlfriend and I were tent camping deep in a remote area of a national park. Suddenly, my girlfriend and I noticed something strange in the sky above the tree line. At first, we assumed it was a meteor. As if the strange lights weren't enough, our electronics began to malfunction. Our GPS stopped working, and our phones lost signal. The forest suddenly felt very isolated and unfamiliar. Just when we thought it couldn't get any stranger, we heard a loud crashing sound in the trees nearby. Whatever was out there was getting closer. My girlfriend and I grabbed our flashlights and cautiously approached the tent to hide inside. We zipped up the tent and huddled together in the dark, listening intently to the sounds around us. Whatever was out there seemed to be circling the tent, making low, growling noises. As the growling continued, we could hear the tent material start to rip and tear. In the morning after, of course, not sleeping at all, we unzipped the tent to the creepiest scene. This next one comes from another Reddit user. When I was about 19 years old, my family and I decided to go camping. The next day, we set out to explore the woods. But no matter how much we walked, we couldn't find the trail. When we woke up in the morning, we ran out of the cave and back to the car. This next one comes from another Reddit user. I was backpacking with two of my best friends. At around 2 a.m. I woke up to what sounded like screams in the forest. In the morning after, of course, not sleeping at all, we unzipped the tent to the creepiest scene. And if you like this video, make sure to check out part 1 and 2 of our scariest camping stories. This one comes from another Reddit user. I was backpacking in the Bear-Tooth Wilderness in the early 2000s with my then girlfriend. The second day we decided to split up. The 4 adults would hike further into the wilderness. We returned to the tent later that evening to find that the zipper was wide open and the kids were gone. It's unclear what happened to the children, but many believe that they were taken by a wild animal, or perhaps an even more sinister force. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and turn on notifications. In today's video, we will be reading from the No Sleep Reddit. So grab your chair, sit back and listen to this terrifying camping story called The Voice on the Radio by 92.1 WDVR. We picked a great spot near Lake Tahoe and set up camp. We had food, water, a book on constellations. We were ready for a good time. It was just my girlfriend and I for our first time, so we decided to go solo camping, just the two of us, which maybe wasn't the best idea. It was an old AM/FM NOAA weather radio we got at an antique store. I wanted to have it to check in with the outside world if we needed to, and that seemed to work. We didn't hear anything else for the rest of the night. And since there was no cell service in the area, this was our only means of communication. On the drive home, we started listening to local news stations to see if there was anything about our area. And that's when we heard that there had been a search and rescue mission for hikers who went missing in that area, but nobody had been found. About halfway through the second night, though, we started hearing this weird static on the radio. I never told anyone because I thought I would look like a crazy person. And the fact that someone else experienced something similar gives me the willies. There's no one else around for miles. You are alone. It's like, yeah, that's true. I hope that that person is okay. Whatever happened to them, I hope they found them. But it seems like they just kind of disappeared into thin air. Also, I would love to know what your scariest camping experience was. So please leave a comment and let me know. I might make a video about some of your comments, so who knows? Maybe your story could be read on this channel. But what makes you think that we need your help? If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Also, you can follow me on social media. I post YouTube updates, random stuff, and I post podcast links every Saturday. And if you want to watch another really scary video, then click the video on screen now. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good night. What makes you think that we want your help? And the fact that it asked them if they had food and how long they thought they could survive out there. It's like, oh, I bet this guy would be great for hunting or maybe for food. I don't know. That's what it sounded like to me. It sounded like it was planning on doing something with these people. We initially thought nothing of it, because sometimes you do get static on these old radios. Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, to me, the scariest part of this story is the fact that it knew their names. I used to babysit for this family, and the dad of the family used to tell me all these stories about, him and his friends going camping and hearing voices in the woods, and seeing things that weren't there, and hearing footsteps behind them, and stuff like that. I always think about that story, and I always think about the times that I've gone camping and hearing things out in the forest, and assuming that it was nothing. But then sometimes it is something, and you just don't know it at the time. And one of the stories he used to tell me, it was very similar to this one. He said one time him and his friends were camping, and they heard voices out in the forest, and they started following the voices, meaning the guys followed the voices. And as they followed the voices were getting closer and closer and closer. And eventually, they found the source of the voices, and it was this log that had fallen off of a tree, and it had kind of rolled down a little hill and landed in a certain way that it made it sound like there was people out there talking, and there was people out there following them. And of course, they ran away, and they never went back to that campsite ever again. It was stuck on that frequency. And the fact that this thing knew exactly where they were, what their coordinates were, that they only had 2 people in the tent, that kind of freaks me out, because how does it know all of this stuff? That makes me wonder how long this thing has been stalking these people, these campers. They didn't even stop and check and see if there was anything on the radio about what happened. No, they just no-peed out of there. Like, let's just hope that whoever that guy was found okay, but I doubt it. I think that whoever this thing is, I think it's still out there looking for its next victims. Did it know that it was talking to real people, or did it just randomly say their names? Because if it knew that it was talking to real people, then that kind of means that it has done this before. We looked at each other and at the radio, confused. "You there with the flashlight," it said again. "Do you need any help? There's no one else around for miles. You are alone." My blood ran cold, and I grabbed the radio, turning the dial frantically. It was stuck on that station. I tried and tried, but I couldn't change it. And for the first few minutes, it was just static. But then above the static, we started to hear voices. "There's only 2 of you there, right? Just checking. Do you have any food left? How long do you think you can survive out here?" It continued to speak for what felt like hours, but I assume it was only a few minutes. I don't remember exactly what it said, but it told us our names, which it didn't know, and things like the fact that it knew our exact latitude and longitude. I remember thinking, how does it know all this stuff? Was it tracking us? At first it sounded like they were talking about general conditions in the area, wind speed and whatnot. And then suddenly they began speaking directly to us. I remember it being something along the lines of, "You there? Yes, you with the flashlight. Are you enjoying your stay here so far?" And then it started speaking to us again. By now, I was very scared. Me and my girlfriend started yelling and making tons of noise to try and scare whatever was out there away from us. In the morning after, of course not sleeping at all, we packed up and got the hell out of there. Now, this happened over 10 years ago, but I still get freaked out when I hear that story on the radio every once in a while. This happened to me. I hope that whoever that guy was found okay, but I doubt it. Also, another thing that really scares me about this story is the fact that they could not change the channel. Then also the fact that in the morning after, of course not sleeping at all, they got the hell out of there. Another thing too, when they started talking to these people, when they were like, "Hey, do you need any help?" So this is a pretty scary story, and I'm glad that this person shared it with us. This reminds me of a story that I used to hear as a kid. But every time I hear a story like this, if you like this story, I suggest you go over to the No Sleep subreddit and read some more, because there are so many crazy stories on there. So I hope you enjoyed this No Sleep Reddit story. I woke up in my tent in the middle of the night to what sounded like someone or something heavy walking directly outside of my tent. It was making guttural sounds like nothing I'd ever heard before. And then I saw two glowing eyes just beyond the light of our campfire. Our next story comes from a Reddit user. The incident happened in the Beartooth Wilderness in the early 2000s. There were no cell phones or anything like that. We had one car, a beat-up old Jeep Cherokee. My two friends and I decided to camp out for a couple of nights near a lake. After eating, we started hearing heavy footsteps near our campsite. Whatever was out there was making guttural sounds like nothing I'd ever heard before. Suddenly, the tent flap opened and two glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. The idea that something could be so big and yet so unknown is terrifying. I screamed and my friends started yelling and making tons of noise. And 8 at the time in the Beartooth Wilderness in the early 2000s. The caretaker of the campground told us about it, claiming that there was a saloon and other buildings where prospectors once lived during the gold rush days. We woke up early the next day, ate some breakfast, packed up, and headed out toward the ghost town. The hike was pretty uneventful, and after about an hour we arrived at the site. Whatever was out there was making guttural sounds like nothing I'd ever heard before. Suddenly, the tent flap opened and two glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. My friend helped her out, and we all piled into the car and drove home. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. This took place a few summers ago, but I've been wanting to post it for a while now. On the first night, we pitched our tent and settled in near the lake shore. On the second morning, we woke up bright and early, stoked to do some fishing. We packed up camp and headed down to the lake. A friend and I decided to take a long weekend trip to the Beartooth Wilderness in the early 2000s. There were no cell phones or anything like that. As we rounded a bend in the trail, we saw a massive boulder field that wasn't there the day before. Little pebbles and dirt were piled up against the tent fly. And surrounding the tent in a near-perfect circle were also 20 or so 100 to 300 pound boulders. My friend and I no-peed out of there. We didn't even bother packing up our stuff. We just ran to the car and drove home. At first glance, it didn't seem like a big deal. We just figured some recent rain must have caused a rock slide. So we continued on our way. We had one car, a beat-up old Jeep Cherokee. To this day, we still don't know what was out there. It's been over 20 years, and the incident still creeps me out. The idea that something could be so big and yet so unknown is terrifying. I screamed, and my son screamed. My daughter started crying, and my friend started yelling and making tons of noise. Whatever was outside the tent didn't like it because it started backing away. It's been over 20 years, and the incident still creeps me out. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. The idea that something could be so big and yet so unknown is terrifying. Then we heard a loud crash and heavy footsteps running away. We checked out the rusty equipment and the chimney and then decided to head back. And if you like scary stories, check out our podcast where we publish new episodes every week. Thanks for watching. In the morning after, of course not sleeping at all, we unzipped the tent to the creepiest scene. All around the tent were thousands of little pebbles that were not there the evening before. And surrounding the tent in a near-perfect circle were also 20 or so 100 to 300 pound boulders. My son and I no-peed out of there. My daughter was too scared to move. She had peed in the tent and wouldn't come out. So my friend stayed with her while I went to get the car. The buildings were said to have burned down almost 100 years ago. And now the only thing that remains is a chimney sticking out of the ground and some rusted mining equipment. After eating, we started hearing heavy footsteps near our campsite. At first, we thought it was a bear because these sounds happened shortly after we left our food supplies there. My friend and I looked at each other and started laughing. It was so obvious that it was a bear. There were no cell phones or anything like that. We had one car, a beat-up old Jeep Cherokee. My two kids and I decided to camp out for a couple of nights near a lake. We set up camp, made a small fire, and started telling ghost stories. Whatever was outside the tent didn't like it because it started backing away. Then we heard a loud crash and heavy footsteps running away. At first, we thought it was a bear because these sounds happened shortly after we left our food supplies there. In the morning after, of course, not sleeping at all, we unzipped the tent to the creepiest scene. All around the tent were thousands of little pebbles that were not there the evening before. And surrounding the tent in a near-perfect circle were also 20 or so 100 to 300-pound boulders. My friend and I no-peed out of there. We didn't even bother packing up our stuff. We just ran to the car and drove home. My friend and I looked at each other and started laughing. It was so obvious that it was a bear. We set up camp, made a small fire, and started telling ghost stories. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. It was only when the creature got closer that we realized how big it really was. Hi, I'm the host. And in this week's episode, we bring you another installment of True Camping Trip Horror Story, where real campers tell their terrifying outdoor tales. One of my friends kept insisting that we should go check out the supposed ghost town nearby. The caretaker of the campground told us about it, claiming that there was a saloon and other buildings where prospectors once lived during the gold rush days. We woke up early the next day, ate some breakfast, packed up, and headed out toward the ghost town. The hike was pretty uneventful, and after about an hour we arrived at the site. We checked out the rusty equipment and the chimney, and then decided to head back. The buildings were said to have burned down almost 100 years ago, and now the only thing that remains is a chimney sticking out of the ground and some rusted mining equipment. My friend wanted to visit this place so bad, but since none of us had flashlights and it was getting dark, we decided we would wait until morning. We stopped for lunch at a scenic spot overlooking a valley. Then we started hearing loud guttural sounds and heavy footsteps coming closer. The commotion was directly outside of our tent. We stayed in the tent for the rest of the night. To this day, we still don't know what was out there. It's been over 20 years, and the incident still creeps me out. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to check out more episodes like it. Our next story is from a Reddit user. This happened just over a year ago while I was backpacking with my two kids, ages 11. One of my friends kept insisting that we should go check out the supposed ghost town nearby. My friend wanted to visit this place so bad, but since none of us had flashlights and it was getting dark, we decided we would wait until morning. We stopped for lunch at a scenic spot overlooking a valley. Then we started hearing loud guttural sounds and heavy footsteps coming closer. The commotion was directly outside of our tent. We stayed in the tent for the rest of the night. When we came back with the car, my daughter was still in the tent. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to check out more episodes like it. For our final story today, we go back to the same area for another Reddit user's tale. We parked at the trailhead and started hiking in toward a lake. After a few hours of unsuccessful fishing, we decided to head back to camp to warm up and have some lunch. As we got closer to our tent site, we started to notice strange things. To this day, we still don't know what was out there. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to check out more episodes like it. That was our camping trip horror story, The Animal That Wasn't. Have you ever seen anything creepy in the woods? Let us know in the comments below.